This problem of evil has exercised thinkers and non-specialist academics, that is, just intelligent, questioning, curious people for millennia who might, for example, believe in a GCB, but who are puzzled, distressed by the amount of evil that they see around them. David Hume, the 18th century philosopher, wrote in a book called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, that is the set of dialogues carried out by three fictional characters, one of whom is named Philo. Philo represents a kind of skeptical philosophical position, and he says to his interlocutors, by way of formulating the problem of evil that we just touched on a moment ago, in reference to the GCB, Philo asks, is he, the GCB, willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he's impotent, or at least not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he's malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? That is, where does evil come from? How could a GCB allow these kinds of things to happen? And then Philo goes on, after making his case, says to his friends, it's your turn now to tug the laboring oar. A nice image, I find, because Hume is asking Philo, or having Philo ask his friends to explain to him how it's possible to consistently believe in a GCB and open up your eyes and look around you and become aware of the amount of suffering the world over. So we can begin to think about how this works by sharpening the problem a little bit. Let's put it in terms of an argument. Premise one. The GCB exists, let's suppose, possibly for reductio ad absurdum, but let's see. The GCB exists and is omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient. That's just going to be things that follow from the definition of the GCB. Premise two. The GCB would therefore be aware of moral or physical evil even before it occurs. That's what omniscience comes to. If you're omniscient, then you know of all the evil that occurs in the world around you, both currently and in the past, and even into the future. 3, the GCB has the power to prevent all evil. That would seem to be what omnipotence actually is. 4, the GCB would will that there be no evil. That is to say, it sure seems like the GCB would prefer that there not be evil. Otherwise, there might be something questionable about the GCB's approach to the world. I know if you're at all like me, you see some evil that's around you, you would want, if at all possible, to prevent it, just out of your nature. But nevertheless, evil exists, and we don't even at this point have to distinguish between physical and moral. Therefore, it seems, there's no GCB. That is, we have turned this into a reductio ad absurdum of premise number 1. That is to say, we've argued that on the assumption that there is a GCB who has the standard definitional attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence, that would prove that there couldn't be any evil, and yet evil does exist. Therefore, there can't be a GCB, because the existence of a GCB produces a contradiction with the fact that evil exists. So that's a kind of sharpening of the problem of evil. Now, the philosopher Leibniz, whose dates were 1647 to 1716, who was a philosopher, a mathematician, and a statesman, who developed, independently of Isaac Newton, the calculus, who was one of the first European intellectuals to take a close interest in Chinese civilization. He invented calculating machines. He was extraordinarily prolific. He had a just unbelievably curious and productive mind. Turned his mind to the problem of evil in many of his writings. And he suggested the following. He suggested perhaps the best plan, if you're a planner, for example, a GCB, you've got very large plans for the entire universe, perhaps the best plan is not always that which seeks to avoid evil. That is to say, maybe there are such things as what are now known as necessary evils, evils that are somehow justified by something that is greater, that is more valuable. And he wants to give an example of this kind. Leibniz writes, God allowed certain creatures the opportunity of exercising their liberty, even when he foresaw that they would turn to evil. Leibniz's suggestion is that there's something especially valuable about a universe in which there's freedom of will, liberty, even if doing so comes at a cost, even if doing so requires our taking the good with the bad. That is, step back and imagine the situation you'd be in if you were a GCB and trying to decide what kind of universe to create. You might say, well, I could create a universe with nothing but non-sentient, lifeless matter floating around, different solar systems, no life anywhere, just a bunch of asteroids and nebulae and so forth. But that, you might say, is a relatively bland world. Maybe there would be a world in which something more interesting would be happening, is one that would be more valuable, more worth creating. So you might say, it seems like it's a better world insofar as you've got free agents that are capable of doing good things for each other, for example, loving each other, caring for each other, doing each other favors, etc. But, you might say, to do that, they have to be free. And in order to be free, that's going to result in the possibility, at least, of their sometimes making mistakes, of their sometimes committing errors, particularly in the form of evil. And so, Leibniz suggests, necessary evils are things that we have to live with. That is, it might be unavoidable that insofar as you've got free will in the universe that you're creating, you might also have some evil. You've got to take the good with the bad. Now, this response to the problem that Leibniz offers, a response to the problem of evil, is therefore going to take a number of different forms. And this can be broken down into a number of different possible ways of, as it were, slogans we might think about. One of them is, you sometimes hear, God is giving us a test. Some people will say, the reason why there's evil is that God wants to find out where we belong. We've talked before about the afterlife when we discussed Pascal and his wager argument, and Leibniz might be suggesting that in order to figure out whether people are destined to go to heaven or to hell, God needs to give us a test. Or, some people have said, perhaps influenced by Leibniz, but perhaps instead influenced by other traditions of philosophical and theological thought, some people will say evil is a kind of non-thing. It's more of a privation than an actual entity. So you can't blame a GCB for its presence. Another line of thought might be to say, well, there's a sense in which what Leibniz is suggesting is that things balance out. You've got some good over here, evil over there, but insofar as you've got more good than the evil that there is, that makes it okay. And other people might follow the slogan, which I've heard before in the form of the idea that you can't have mountains without valleys. If you want to have some mountains, things that rise to great heights, that is, the heights being things like virtue, decency, sincerity, perseverance, etc., you've got to have some valleys as well, where the valleys consist in various forms of evil. So let's go and think about how these things flesh out, how we can flesh out these possible responses to the problem of evil. To do so, I want to make another distinction, the distinction between the question, is the existence of some evil compatible with the existence of a GCB? And if you can show that the existence of some evil in the world is compatible with the existence of a greatest conceivable being, then you've given what's known as a defense. But notice that that's a much more modest project than the more ambitious project that I'm going to call a theodicy, where a theodicy tries to show that the existence of the actual amount of evil that there is in the world is compatible with the existence of a GCB. You can get a defense by showing that there is one little iota of evil that exists in the world that is compatible with the GCB. But that does not give you a theodicy, because you'd also have to show that all the actual evil that there is compatible with the GCB. So a theodicy implies a defense, but not vice versa. A theodicy is a much more ambitious project, and we'll be asking in a moment just how far one can go. Can you give a defense, and can you go beyond that to a theodicy, and if so, how?